This is what television news is currently running with this hour. Aftershocks are continuing in Nepal, resulting in people choosing to reside on the streets. People slept outside in the city's capital, Kathmandu, last night, either because their homes were destroyed or because they feared the aftershocks. Scores of bodies have been ferried to hospitals across the country, many of which are still struggling to cope with the number of the injured. The magnitude 7.9 earthquake struck the Himalayas nation, one of the poorest countries in the world, with reports of almost 2,000 people dead and thousands others wounded. Ramaphosa informal settlement community members east of Johannesburg will take to the streets tomorrow to welcome back their fellow Africans from the continent. This as foreign nationals are slowly returning to their communities. Many fled following the xenophobic attacks which fled up many mainly in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal in areas. In Gauteng, community leaders in Ramaphosa informal settlement came together to bridge the gap between foreign nationals and locals.
Top stories at this hour. The death toll in Nepal expected to rise sharply, and Malema continues to condemn xenophobia. Good morning, I'm Tabile Ngwato.
Let's have a look at other stories that are making headlines on other media platforms, and we'll start with the SABC Radio News. SABC News Online is also leading with the following this hour. Well, thank you so much for joining us with Media Monitor and welcoming us into your homes. Media Monitor is a platform where we discuss the news that made everybody talk, looking at stories from across all media platforms. We also aim to deepen your understanding of the role of media in our democracy while creating more awareness among TV viewers, radio listeners, newspaper readers, as well as users of social media. To be part of our discussions today, call us on the following numbers. It's +2711 714 6843, 714 6847, and 714 6857, or interact with us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. A very good morning to you. Welcome, a very good morning. Our editors this morning are Sibusiso Ngalwa, the Sunday Times Durban Bureau Chief, as well as Mr. Dominique Mahlangu, the Deputy Editor of the Times. Sibusiso, a very good morning to you in Durban. Thank you for joining us here on Media Monitor.
Good morning to you, Alicia, and good morning to my colleague Dominique and to the viewers at home.
Thank you so much for joining us. Dominique, a very good morning to you once again. Thank you for joining us on Media Monitor.
No, morning, and morning to viewers at home and to Sibusiso in Durban.
All right, gentlemen, let's go straight ahead and look at what is making news headlines today. The Sunday Times, Daddy isn't coming home. Also in the Sunday Times headline, the death toll soars in Nepal quake. The Sunday Tribune, fresh face off for DA. And of course, the City Press, their muscle trumps power. Let's now have a look at other headlines across the African continent. Nigeria's Sunday Trust, Buhari reads Riot Act to family members. The Zimbabwean Sunday Mail says new SADC strategies to drive growth. And at the bottom page of the same paper, the headline reads Zimbabwean in 2 horrific SA attacks. All right, gentlemen, let's get straight into it. Let's start with the City Press today. Very heavy headline there says muscle trumps power. Well, basically a municipality in Mpumalanga here has apparently not settled its 560 million rand debt to Eskom, and of course, but has managed to fork out 20 million rand per year on a senior on bodyguards for senior managers. Now, look, Eskom had threatened to cut power to the owing municipalities, and 60 million rand in debt, really, is that the way to go? Why isn't this being probed further? Where is this money for the bodyguards coming from? Let's start with you, Dominique.
No, I think this story should be just repeated across the entire nation. I mean, what is happening in that municipality in Mpumalanga, I mean, it's happening all over the country. You find that monies get diverted and monies get used for other things, but the monies that are meant to uplift service delivery, you know, it's a shame that they get just diverted just like that. I mean, it's not a surprise that it's about 20 million that has been used to guard senior officials. But at the end of the day, when you've got service delivery protests and people asking questions, when are you going to deliver on services? Managers will simply tell you that they don't have the funds, they don't have the capacity, but it's so quick. It's so quick to have this fund signed off, and also making sure that our senior officials are taken care of. I mean, for an example, it's so easy for an official immediately gets appointed into an office. It takes them hardly three weeks or a month or so to get that car that they want. But to get projects going, it will take something like a year to 2 years. So when it comes to their issues, it's so easy to get things done. But when it comes to the issues that are supposed to benefit the people that elected them into office, no, it will take a year or 2 years or so.
So what do you think of this story? Who should be held accountable? I mean, why isn't there further probe about these figures?
I think on the story about how much municipalities owe Eskom, I think it's the case everywhere. And also, if you listened to the CEO of Eskom a week ago, where he was talking about how much money, that the billions that they are owed by municipalities, it doesn't look like municipalities take this seriously. And you heard him talk about connecting homes directly and also installing prepaid meters. Maybe that's the way to go to make sure that Eskom is able to make money. But on the story about the officials that have paid so much money on bodyguards, that is another problem that we have, especially in that layer of government, which is local government, where you find ordinary councillors with bodyguards, and they have millions that are spent on bodyguards. I think here in Durban, just a while ago, there was a story about how councillors were being guarded by Metro Police. Now, you'd imagine that Metro Police's job is not to guard politicians or even councillors. So how it gets to that, and I think I think there should be more outrage, as you are saying, when it comes to such stories, Alicia.
And who should we blame for this, Dominic? Should we blame Eskom for letting this problem escalate so far? Why aren't they collecting their own debts?
No, I think when the ANC government moved into office back in 1994, I mean, there's one thing that they failed to do, to tell our people that now we're in government, democratically elected, now we should pay for services. I mean, we know the strategy that was used before ANC came into office was to render the state ungovernable at that time. And the process that was used was not to pay for services, because of those services were not even adequate. But now the ANC is in government. It should go back to the people and tell them that you should pay for what you use. I think this culture is becoming normal, and I'm afraid that as we get closer to elections, there will be this notion coming from our elected officials that we should scrap the debt, we should make sure that people are taken care of. And people down there are not stupid. I mean, they will continue with this thing as long as our politicians are not willing to go back and tell people that you pay for what you use.
Let's move on to the next paper there. That is, of course, the Sunday Times. And the headline boldly reads there, "Daddy isn't coming home." It is a harrowing tale of how, of course, the slain foreigner, Emmanuel Sitole's family in Mozambique, is still trying to come to terms with his tragic death. And the fact that he was also a breadwinner of the family. And they're also thinking what will happen to his 3 kids. And he's also got 2 wives. We'll say so sad. We're still going to reel in shame for some time due to the xenophobic attacks, aren't we? Reading this can only make you hang your head in shame as a South African. What's happening in terms of this in Durban, Sbusiso?
Surely, Alicia, it is such a shocking story and a heartbreaking story, that of Emmanuel Sitole, his murder in broad daylight, and those pictures being flashed on the front pages of the Sunday Times. Maybe I'd want to make this point first. I think there's been a lot of criticism of the Sunday Times about the picture, but I think it was a good decision to run that picture on the front page of the Sunday Times, because it brought home the horror and the brutality of these xenophobic attacks. And I think if the government is serious, as they say they are, I think that kind of a picture is the one that would have forced them into action and actually to do more than just mouthing off promises of strengthening security and protecting lives. So I think it is that kind of a picture that brings home the horror of it all. And I think looking at the Sunday Times today, you would see that we went a step further and found this man and went further and found his family and humanized him. He was not just another statistic of a foreigner killed. And he was a man, he was a father, he was a husband, he was a son, he was a brother, and his name was Emmanuel Sithole. So that is the story that we brought you this morning. But talking about how the xenophobic attacks affect us, as you can see, even today, 3 weeks into it, we still have the newspapers, our newspapers, leading about this story. In fact, including the City Press edition here in KZN, talking about the conditions in the camps. So it is a story that I think has been captured very well by the media, and it has actually galvanized government and also civil society to do more about it, because we saw the horrible side, and we hung our heads in shame, as you are saying. But at the same time, you saw the caring side of South Africans, civil society and organizations going out there assisting these communities and these displaced people.
Very interesting, Sbusi, so that the Sunday Times actually did that shocking graphical picture last week on Sunday Times, and then today they actually decided to do a follow-up. What do you think about this follow-up, Dominic? Does it make sense? Was it necessary? Shouldn't we be doing that about other stories? Because Sbusi so rightly pointed that that person was not a statistics. He was a man with a family and a name.
I think, I mean, it would have been wrong for Sunday Times not to follow the story in this manner. I mean, as you read the story, you begin to not only look at Emmanuel Sithole, but now you look at him as a family man. You look at him as a brother, you know. In that instance, you become part of his story. You become part of the tragedy. You become part of the shame that South Africa has brought to the international world. But what the story also tells us, how the Sunday Times followed it, it tells us that for every incident, for every death that is happening in our streets, we should always be mindful of the consequences of it. Be a father, be a mother, I mean, everyone has got a connection. You know, it cannot just be a statistic out there to say that, oh, only 4 people died this year as compared to last year. We should always try as a media to go back and check the impact of the incident.
So in terms of the integration, we know that integration started happening, especially in places around the country during this week. How has that panned out in Durban? Have people finally accepted, the results of the situation that they are really reeling of shame from?
In terms of reintegration, I think, as I made the point earlier on about organizations and communities actually that have said, not in our name, that marched against the xenophobic attacks, I think the test here will be the reintegration of the displaced people back to to those communities they came from. But obviously, I think Home Affairs has their work cut out for them, because I read somewhere that as many as 98% of the foreign nationals that were at the camp in Isipingo, that none of them had documents. And the usual claim is that, yes, we've lost them in the fire and we don't have the documents, and so we cannot prove. So obviously they'll have to go through that meticulous process of checking against if the people are here legally, and those that they are, then they can reintegrate them into the communities, and those that are not will probably have to be sent back to their countries. But talking about reintegration, obviously the biggest challenge there is actually to make sure that you have communities that actually stand up and protect foreign nationals and protect fellow human beings against these marauding gangs of criminals who are taking advantage of the situation.
You know, the funny thing is, Dominic, nobody mentioned, the King's apology in all this, the apology that you so wanted from the King. Very quickly.
No. I think the king has learned his lesson out of this whole unfortunate incident. And I think that going forward, he will not only mind his language, but he will begin to think twice about what he says. Because of his voice carries a lot of weight. And we have seen after he made those statements, how these xenophobic incidents started spreading. And the pattern that it took, that it was around hostels. And then it tells us another story altogether, especially when it comes to the South African history that we know of. I mean, in the 80s and the 90s, how violence started spreading from the hostels to the townships. And this one, I'm glad that government was able to step in, even though it was a bit late, but at least action seems to be taken.
But media took a lot of flack for this. It was blamed for the way that they actually reported on xenophobia, and it seemed to be the perpetrator of what led to the attacks afterwards. And it seems that the media was actually fueling this fire. But let's leave it there. We're going to take a very quick ad break, and after that, we're going to discuss the inside stories from our newspapers. That's what's coming up next. Stay with us.
Dudes and dudettes, did you know that us young people make up more than like 1/3 of South Africa's population, but only like 1/4 of the voters? I mean, what's up with that? We're the ones who can make a difference. You, me, everybody. Register and make it happen. Cheers, dudes.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. If you've just joined us in our Auckland Park studios, our editors this morning are in our Durban studio, Sbusi Songalwa. He's the Sunday Times Durban Bureau Chief, as well as here in Auckland Park, Mr. Dominic Mahlangu, the Deputy Editor of the Times. Look, there are also other interesting stories that didn't necessarily make the front pages. Let's have a look at them now. While the world has focused on xenophobia in South Africa, migration proves to be a global issue, with the latest Mediterranean tragedy that is said to have claimed over 700 African and Bangladeshi migrant lives. The Sunday Times, the race for a place hots up at choosy schools. That is on page 8. On the same paper as well, it's Sunday Times, the passport puzzle in SA Mule case. That story is on page 4. Staying with the Sunday Times, the stray bullets that found the innocents in the Cape's war zone. And the City Press, the other DA race. There we go again, the City Press, a money mountain to climb. And that is, of course, in Vegas on the Floyd Mayweather story. Gentlemen, let's have a look at those stories, inside stories, in depth now. Let's start with the Sunday Times on page 8. Now, this is a very nice story here. Race for a place hots up at choosy schools. It is a piece about the admission criteria in the recent schools that are in the spotlight again this week. And it speaks to how parents have to go to extremes to have a slight chance of their kids being admitted at certain schools. Now, this online register that has apparently been launched by the government, do you think it's a good idea, Dominic? Do you think it's going to address the long queues that we saw that a parent actually got killed in one of the universities in the recent years?
I think that's the way to go. I mean, as we look at how University of Johannesburg managed to stop that chaos that we always experience in the start of the school year. And now, I mean, with the Gauteng MEC launching this online application, and I think that it's a way to go. Unfortunately, I mean, it was not really aggressively marketed. That is why we saw parents still queuing outside schools. And it tells us that it's a ritual that people in Gauteng and Cape Town and in other provinces, they are so used to it. But I think government needs to aggressively push the online application system.
Well, it says in the article there that even Panyaza Lesufi's wife didn't trust the system. She actually went and queued at one of the schools to have their kid enrolled in grade 8. Musi, so what do you think about this? Is the competition this tight for parents to admit their children in schools around Durban?
I think every parent wants the best education for their kid, and they want the best that money can buy. I think it's a bit embarrassing for the MEC there that you introduce such a system and then your very wife is there queuing with other parents. But it just shows the desperation that of parents, of how much they want to go to actually get those places, because space is limited. And everyone wants to be there, and I'm sure these are the reputable schools that have produced good results in the future. So I think it is inevitable that you'll have those kind of queues. I'm not so sure, though, as to how successful an online or an online-based system will work. I think unless it is unpacked and explained fully, if it will work like the Central Applications Office here in KZN, which takes applications on behalf of tertiary institutions. But then you have so many schools, you have hundreds of schools. How does it work? Who controls it? Who decides? Who shortlists and those kind of things? Do you take away that responsibility from the schools themselves? I'm not sure, but I think unless it is explained fully, I think as for now, I'm not convinced.
It also raises the question of what about the schools in the rural areas who don't necessarily have, those resources to do the online applications, Dominic?
Yeah, I think as South Africans, we are always looking into the technology and everything, and we forget about the vast tracts of land that is out there in terms of the rural areas and the needs in such schools in order to catch up. And if government is going to seriously look at the new way of enrolling kids into schools, it should also look at how it brings in the rural areas into the program, because they cannot be treated as stepchildren, in this country. They are part of the system, and the system should also benefit them, even though they are in the outlying areas.
The question, it also relates to the e-learning tablet system in terms of what happens when there's load shedding, as we saw there in the report there that the minister was trying to launch the very tablet and then there was load shedding. So, these issues need to be addressed, I think, before many of these ventures are actually introduced. Let's move on now and look at the City Press's page 4, the other DA race. Now, things are heating up at the DA camp as the competition for the second most senior position in the DA, of course, is said to be even more fiercely contested than the actual post itself. Now, in the running, Makashule Gana, Masizole Mnasela, as well as Ethel Trollip vowing to replace Wilmot James. So now the guns will come out blazing. The provincial elect in Durban yesterday, Zwakele Mwango, was announced in Durban. Who can we expect to come out trumps, judging from the three by their campaigns and history in the DA so far? So let's start with you in Durban.
I think from the reports I've read and also following up on the story, I think Athol Trollip actually stands a good chance, because remember, he was at some point the chief whip of the Democratic Alliance in the National Assembly, and he's been a leader of the DA in the Eastern Cape for the longest time. And Mr. Mnasela, on the other hand, was in Parliament, and when he clashed with Helen Zille, we saw him, I would say, demoted, because he ended up in the provincial legislature. While Makashule seems to be, he's been the DA youth leader, and he's seen as the rising star, one of the young guns within the DA. But I think, from what I understand, Mr. Trollip stands a good chance, and I think if you had looked at Ms. Zelle's decision not to contest the leadership, one of the reasons that was given, or that has been argued, is that she did not want a top leadership of the DA that is too white. As you would understand, that she has been trying to change the face of the DA and also present the DA as this party that appeals to everyone. So it would have not looked nice for her to have a federal chairperson being a white Athol Trollip. So, but the focus mostly has been on the top job, which is that of the party leader. and rightfully so, because obviously everybody wants to know who will replace Helen Zille. Will it be Musima Imane? Is he young and agile, and will he be able to outrun the 53-year-old Wilmot James? I think the DA Congress will tell us in a week's time or so.
Dominique, the DA did say they want to address the issue of race within the party, but do you think that just changing the leaders is going to address the actual structure of what might be going wrong within the party to not get the elections, maybe?
No. I think the whole thing of race, being at the center of what we see within the DA, it points to one thing, that DA has reached a stage where now it needs to choose the direction that they want to take for the next 20 years. And I can tell you that whoever is chosen at the end of the day, they will want to emphasize that race doesn't play a serious role in the future of the DA. But as we know, it does. It's at the center of everything. If Musima Imane gets elected, DA will change focus, and we'll have to see how Maimane takes DA to another level. But failure to elect the right leader, because of Wilmot James, there will those who will argue that he's still a black leader according to classifications in South Africa. But at the end of the day, DA has now entered another level, which I always call the real politics. Because of now, with the race now taking place for other positions, it opens up DA to the public. Now it's no longer a question of anointed leadership. It's a question of people must go there, they must canvass for votes.
Look, the DA, Durban-elect Mngwango, announced yesterday that he's taking his fight to the local rural leaders, and he actually wants to include the people in rural areas. So this is, a great strategy probably for the upcoming local government elections. But let's move on. I know the boys are going to love this one. Let's move on to the City Press's page 20 there. A money mountain to climb in Vegas. Well, it's all eyes to the fight of the century between, of course, Mr. Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. Apparently, the tickets went online and they vanished in seconds at £94,000. That's vaguely 1.7 million rand. Please tell us about this fight, Smoo. Every sport lover knows this is a big one. The belt is rumored to cost a fortune, with emeralds and gold lining, to mention a few. Big spender fight, isn't it?
I think those who do not have DSTV will actually get compact for that fight. I will set my alarm and make sure that I am up for the curtain raisers and also the main fight. 3 a.m. I am up for that particular fight. Everybody wants to see who is the greatest in terms of pound-for-pound boxers. Is it money? My money is on money. I think Mayweather will take it. But it just shows you how influential he has been, and also how much this fight has been anticipated. The fact that finally it's happening. It's been in the making for a number of years, and there's been hagglings around drug tests, and the one camp saying, no, we don't agree to this, and no, we do not want to do this test this way. But finally, it's happening, and Mayweather is unbeaten. He goes into this fight. The stronger character, he's got a bigger mouth, but let's see if he can carry it.
Did I not say the boys are going to love this one? Dominique, what do you think?
No, I've already lined up a few of my friends to say that if ESCOM decides to spoil the party, who's got the nearest generator in town, so that we don't miss the fight. But I agree with Sbu is that everyone who loves boxing will surely not miss this thing. But I think it's also it comes at the right time. That boxing at some point after Mike Tyson, no one was interested. And I think now everyone is going back to the sport to say that they want to see at the end of the day who's going to win.
Look, we had a Dingan. Come on, Dominique, let's leave it there for now. We're going to take a quick ad break, and after that we discuss the xenophobic attacks that have been highlighted in the media and some of the relief efforts that the government has implemented. We'll be back shortly after this.
Oh, hi. Just brushing up on my party. We are going to make it number 12, official. Let me teach you a quick word. Quite a star. A woman who has mastered the art of dancing in high heels. It's up and flip, huh?
Keep it classy with a bottle of Sky Vodka for $169.99 and help make party South Africa's 12th official language. Tops at Spa. Shake things up.
Welcome back. South Africans from all walks of life have embarked on anti-xenophobia campaigns following a spate of attacks, of course, that has attracted continental and international criticism. Let's have a look at this insert compiled by one of our producers, Maleboho Makutle.
South Africans from all walks of life this week joined hands to express their outrage at xenophobic attacks that has drawn condemnation across the world. King Goodwill Zwelithini called on his subjects to defend and protect all foreign nationals at the Imbizo.
Today I'm here to declare war. But not the war you are thinking about. I'm talking about the war against attacks on other Africans to protect foreign nationals.
Mangosuthu Buthelezi shared the same sentiments as the king.
Our people are attacking the very neighbors who gave us refuge during our own liberation struggle. These are the people with whom we have had trade ties, historical ties, and ties of humanity. There is no sense in what is happening, my fellow Zulus. A spark has been ignited and it has taken flame in terrible proportions.
Defense Minister Mapisa Ngqakula announced the deployment of the army in all volatile areas across the country. She told a media conference in Alexandra that the deployment is aimed at assisting the police to deal with the criminal activities associated with the spate of xenophobic attacks in hotspot areas.
We are now reclaiming the authority of the state of the Republic of South Africa. We cannot have the lumpen proletariat determining what is going to happen in this country and how this country is going to be governed.
After meeting with business, civil, and religious leaders, President Zuma said his government would take decisive steps to address the underlying problems behind the attacks and ensure foreigners are safe.
We are going to embark on a program to address the issues that need to be addressed, emanating from the papers, those who are illegal, regularizing the papers and everything, dealing with the small business, how the businesses themselves should be regularized, how do we deal with areas that people say they become centers of drug dealing.
Zuma says the committee's task will be to look at root causes of xenophobic attacks moving forward.
And now to give us more analysis whether or not these efforts restore the dented image of the country, we are joined on the line by Sarah Kimani, SABC reporter in Kenya, as well as Shingai Nyoka, SABC News correspondent in Zimbabwe, to give us insight of the media coverage in the two countries. While the world has focused on xenophobia in South Africa, migration proved to be the global issue, with the latest Mediterranean tragedy that is said also to have claimed over 700 lives. Okay, that was on the migrant story. Sarah, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Media Monitor. Now, with all the relief efforts being conducted to curb xenophobic attacks, what is the perception of South Africa in your country right now in terms of media?
Well, I'll give a perspective of the East African region, which I cover and which has extensively covered the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. What we notice is that in countries, Kenya, where nobody has been said, much of the talk has been on social media. The media has covered the attack, but most of them have covered it from the wires. But in countries like Ethiopia, Somalia, and Tanzania, they have given it more coverage because those residents from those countries have been affected. And even more so for them is because their countries were instrumental in housing, in hosting ANC comrades during the apartheid regime. So most of them expressing shock, others expressing disgust. But in countries like Kenya, where we have had young people go to study and get work in South Africa, a lot of them standing by South Africans and saying, this is not the South Africa we know, these are not the South Africans we know. But others feeling that the government has taken too long to react, feeling the media also could have done more to educate the younger South Africans on the role the rest of Africa played in liberating South Africa.
Sarah, don't go away. Let's find out from Shingai, who's in here in Zimbabwe, and find out, Shingai, what is our perception as a country in Zimbabwe over the violent attacks on foreign nationals?
Well, good morning to you, Alicia. And as you can imagine, this is a story that hits right to the core of Zimbabweans, given the fact that millions of Zimbabweans are in South Africa, some of them legally and some of them illegally. We really have only, over the last week or so, been able to experience the first-hand reports of the violence against Zimbabwean nationals. About 800 people returned home over the last week. And really there's been a lot of disappointment in terms of the reports in the news media, disappointment at what has happened in South Africa. And very similar to what Sarah Kimani has said, given the fact that Zimbabwe was a frontline state, it's a state which hosted South Africa during its own liberation struggle. President Jacob Zuma was a very well-known figure in Zimbabwe. When he traveled here as a representative of the MK, he was hosted here. Thabo Mbeki and his family were also hosted here. And so there's a lot of... there's an incredulous reaction to what is happening there. And also in the media, people are really speaking about the need to educate not just South Africans, but the youth about the liberation history of the region.
Ladies, to both of you now, the message was always that it's not all South Africans that are xenophobic. Do your citizens understand and accept this view at this stage? Let's start with you, Sarah.
Well, citizens understand, but it depends on who you speak to, because there are people who, when I meet them on the streets, will even ask me, are these the kind of people you work for? Because they know I work for the South African broadcast. And so you find yourself having to put down, your perceptions and having to speak to them. But there are those who, like the Daily Nation, came out very strongly with a column saying that South Africans have forgotten so fast the role that the rest of the continent played, meaning even the media feels that more could have been done, and also taking the whole global view that it is not one South African that attacked this before. It is not just a section, but taking it as a whole and taking it globally, that more could have been done. And that is also the perception we got from one of the regional dailies here called the East African, which dedicated several pages to xenophobic attacks last week, in the last week issue. And most of it is trying to show that the government and the people of South Africa have failed the continent.
Shingai, your views?
Well, I think after the initial outrage and anger directed at South Africans generally, I think people have calmed down over the last couple of days, especially given the reaction and the tough stance that the South African government, the community leaders, as well as ordinary South Africans themselves have done in terms of marches against xenophobia. People are realizing that this is just an element, a criminal element within South Africa, and also the fact that people have really refused to boycott South African goods. There's been calls as well to boycott the upcoming COSAFA soccer tournament, but the authorities have really tried to emphasize the point that the South African government is doing all that it can to assist the refugees and the victims, and that this is an isolated issue. It's not as if all South Africans should be held responsible for this.
Thank Thank you so much for giving us insight as to how the media in your countries have covered the xenophobic attacks that have occurred in South Africa in the past couple of weeks. That was Sarah Kimani in Kenya, as well as Shingai Nyoka in Zimbabwe. Panel, very quickly. Sbu, let's start with you. I mean, this whole thing is attributed to starting in Durban, but I mean, people have entrusted South Africa as the promised land and the land of delivery. What are people saying now with all the efforts that have been put in place by government, by leaders, rural leaders, as well as the citizens themselves, to try and show the world that it's not everybody that thinks that xenophobia is a right thing to do?
I think our image as South Africa took a huge dent, and it will take a while before we reclaim that lost space. But I think the picture is starting to change. That image of us South Africans as ungrateful and barbaric, violent, I think it's starting to change with the very images of some of the efforts that were mentioned by Shingai and that we're aware of, including civil society and church leaders people marching against the xenophobic attacks, and also going out and you see, I think what was most encouraging for me was the reports that came out of Kagiso, where communities were actually standing guard and saying, you will not do it here, we will protect our fellow brothers and sisters from African countries. And this is not what South African society is about, that there is more to South Africans. South Africans are caring people. But at the same time, let us not shy away from the reality that we are a violent nation, and also the fact that there's a lot of ignorance in so far as our communities are concerned. But also, I think a point has been made, which is a correct point, to say that there are also the underlying economic conditions, socio-economic conditions that are at play, which we also need to look at. So it's not enough to actually condemn and march and do everything that we're saying we're doing against xenophobic attacks. You actually need to go beyond that and actually address some of the underlying issues going forward.
Let's leave it there. Thank you so much. And after the break, we look at how we can declare that we are a free nation, yet our foreign counterparts are still being attacked in our own country. We'll have more information on Freedom Day shortly after this. Stay with us. Well, the month of April is a month of significance for the nation as South Africans celebrate freedom. But critics will argue that how do we begin to celebrate this freedom when we have not learned its true meaning? Where were we when struggle stalwarts like Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, as well as Walter Sisulu sacrificed their lives to bring us this freedom, which many now take for granted? The manner in which the 27th of April is celebrated remains a bone of contention. Can we afford this year more than any other year to celebrate with music festivals and braais when the South African soil is mourning the loss of its sons and daughters through senseless acts of criminality disguised as xenophobia? Is this not the day to stand in solidarity and declare that we are not free unless our African brothers and sisters are free? While joining us for this discussion is former commander of the MK, Mr. Stanley Manong, and author of If We Must Die, as well as Mukobe Morris Masuta, a Born Free, who's a founder and executive chairperson of the Tusanani Foundation. He also just led a 1 million rand fundraising march for Wits University students earlier on in this year. Gentlemen, thank you so much. What an honor to have both of you here in studio with us. Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Mr. Manong, let's start with you, sir. You both come from different generations, but what does Freedom Day mean to you as a veteran MK?
Yes, no, thank you very much, Alicia, and also to your viewers. To me, Freedom Day means a culmination of a process that was started many decades and centuries ago by our forefathers like Cetshwayo and going up to Pixley Kaseme, Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, and today, yes, the current president, Comrade President Jacob Zuma. That those efforts of fighting against apartheid. We were also thrilled when we defeated apartheid and we managed to install a government that is elected by the people of South Africa. That's correct.
Mukobo, how do you celebrate the 27th of April? What does it mean to you as a Born Free?
Well, let's just correct that. I'm not a Born Free per se.
All right.
I was born before 1994, but also, even if I was born after 1994, I still wouldn't accept the concept of Born Free, largely because it's the concept itself is highly misled. In how it's used outside, it's used largely very opportunistically. But for me, I would say within the context of South Africa, freedom should not be seen as an event, but rather a process of decolonizing both the oppressor and the oppressed, largely because, as you were stating earlier, the architects of apartheid and colonialism know very well that South Africa is only free today, or South Africa was only able to defeat them today through the collaboration efforts of the rest of our continent. It is therefore said that on this, or on the eve of this Freedom Day, we have allowed the borders that they drew decades ago to also apply in our brains. And I think if we can approach it from that perspective, then we'll be able to go to the underlying causes of why we are, of the problems and the socio-economic challenges that we face today.
But Stanley, the way the day is celebrated has drawn lots of criticism over the years, with many calling this a time for boozing and partying, which has totally lost the real meaning behind the day itself. What do you say to that?
Well, I wouldn't blame them, because to be honest, most of the people who participated in the liberation struggle, they feel marginalized nowadays, especially my colleagues. Well, I will talk specifically about my comrades, colleagues, who were in the trenches of Angola, who fought next to Bani Molokwane, who fought next to Mainstay Chibuku, who were lucky to be alive today, but they are paupers. So to them, as far as they're concerned, Freedom Day does not mean anything. So I wouldn't really blame them when they regard this as just an ordinary day.
But what does this do to you as a former veteran of the MK? You fought for this very same freedom, Put Stanley.
Yes, well, it's a pity. Some of the things have worked out this way. I know that the government has really tried very hard to honor those who participated in the liberation struggle, like enacting laws that will help military veterans. But sometimes those laws, they don't filter down. The application of those laws do not affect the military veterans. Still, many are still living under squalor conditions in this country.
And that was my next question, that our democracy is turning 21 tomorrow. Are we where we ought to be as a country? What do you think of that?
No, not at all. We're not where we are supposed to be, although we have made significant progress.
True.
But I think we need to, on this Freedom Day, we need to revisit our understanding of what was the purpose of the struggle. And that will be able to guide us on how we move forward. I will raise the following example. Today we live in a country that is very materialistic, that is dominated by unsustainable levels of consumption. And as far as I understand it, the struggle was for the restoration of the dignity of African people and for the restoration of the dignity of our continent. And that was the purpose. Today, some go as far as telling us that, no, we struggled so that we can live like white people. That's a complete distortion of what the struggle was about. In fact, we cannot claim to be trying to achieve universal access to socio-economic rights while maintaining opulence and the same unsustainable levels of consumption, because we will just go backwards, essentially.
Thank you so much, Mokobe, for those comments there. Well, unfortunately, thank you so much to both of you for being here with us today. And of course, let's hope that Freedom Day tomorrow is celebrated in the light that it truly represents who and where we come from as a nation. And that was a view from different generations looking at what tomorrow's holiday means to each of them. We really should cherish the diversity of our culture and rich history. Happy Freedom Day in advance. Let this day be a day of self-introspection for each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching Media Monitor today. I'd like to thank all my studio guests, Sbusiso in Durban, as well as Dominique right here in studio with us. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll see you again next week right here on the SABC News Channel for more Media Monitor. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
We live in a digital era, and the number of Africans with mobile phones is rapidly increasing.
Twitter use is predominantly being done on smartphones. This is a very African phenomenon.
Here, there are constantly new innovative ways to make the internet more affordable. With that, we're seeing protests against governments proposing methods to limit access. On Network, we give you information about all of this. We also have new computers, games, and robots.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Who are we, you ask? This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house, as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual. We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
Who are we, you ask? This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house, as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual. We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
As dawn breaks over the eastern plains of the Lowveld, a new day begins in the mystery land of the Lobedu, land of offerings, where the wild hog is protected as a sacred totem animal. Of the many tribes and cultures in South Africa, the Lobedu, perhaps more than any other tribe, have with their rain queen Mojaji captured the imagination of numerous chiefs, adventurers, writers, researchers, and visitors. According to oral history, the Lobedu can be linked to the once mighty and powerful dynasties of the Karanga state in Zimbabwe, also known as Mohalaka, which disintegrated during the 16th century. Legend and historical fact became